Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. I'm Tommy Norman. I'm with Ackland Avenue. I'm the Chief Agility Officer there. And I finally got to hook up with Tricia Broderick from Ignite, the founder and leader of Ignite, a consultant, speaker, and author. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Thank you so much for squeezing in. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm still trying to process the author added to my bio. Like that's a very it's surreal but real now. It's
It,
it's it's awesome.
and this is your first book, right?
It is, and not something I ever set out going, I'm going to write a book. When in fact,
Right.
I actively fought it. But it is definitely an accomplishment that I'm really, really proud of doing. Not just the contents, just the process and just overcoming that fear and everything. So I'm
Right.
so glad it's true this, even though it was never kind of an original goal of mine.
Right. And here it is right here. I've got my
Oh, look
copy.
at that.
It's great.
Although I get yelled at because if you have the glare occasionally,
Yeah.
it can look like with blame. And Matt Ampler was so funny. He was like, I think you need to take the photo again.
I mean, it could be one of those books where you kind of tell one side of the story to prove the other side of the story.
Actually, that was the joke. Eric Wilkie was like, we should totally write the other book.
I've wanted to do a presentation like that, kind of like the Stephen Colbert with the Colbert Report, where you just kind of take the other thing. But the problem with today is I'm sure there'd be a bunch of people in there going, you know what, he's right. No,
He's
I'm
right.
not.
Or they
So,
would take it out of context and then they would label it forever. And
yeah, I'd get it plastered all over. Tommy Norman believes waterfall is making a comeback. So I do want to get to the book, but I do want to talk to, these interviews I've been doing have stemmed from, getting everybody back together in Agile 22, which is so great. It was in our little hometown of Nashville again. And it was so much fun for me personally, to see everyone. We got to bring a bunch of our team members up from Honduras who loved it. It was so great to kind of see them. The best compliment we got as a company internally was, these are a lot of young people that are very new to Agile, and some of them, Ackland is the only place they've ever worked. And I was asking them about, what do you think about the sessions? And a couple of them were like, man, I mean, they're all right. I mean, I thought they'd be deeper. And the thing is I think it was a testament to we're doing things right. We've solved a lot of these problems that you see time and time again. Like, how do we do story points and how do we do this? And we've exchanged that for larger problems. We still have problems, but seeing them kind of go, well, I thought there'd be a lot deeper content. And I'm like, that's actually a good thing. That you see that some of these problems are there. So it was great for us. What did you see, when you were there? What topics kind of caught your eye?
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. This Agile Alliance conference is one that I've attended every year since 2007, minus COVID.
Right.
Year. And so to be back in person, my soul needed it, to be back in that community and things. But when you were talking, you're mentioning the reaction stuff. I actually remember it was part of the reason why I got heavily involved in volunteering, because I was like, no, I need deeper sessions, right? And Kat McDonald's was like, then help us plan, right? I was like, well, okay. And then I started volunteering for that. But Arlo Belshi actually challenged me one year, and I'll never forget it because I was getting a little arrogant, cocky, a little bit, maybe and I was like, oh, this is too basic of a session. I want a deeper session. And Arlo goes, you're better than that. You can always pull something from any session, but you might have to dig for it. It may not be what they're trying to teach you, but what can you pull? And ever since Arlo challenged me, now when I attend sessions, the content might be a really foundational content, but then I may be going, how are they teaching it? What are they doing? I'll go meta on it, or I'll go bigger on another layer and have it inspire new thoughts. So there is almost a switch that happens for people where you get beyond the basics, but then you're in this limbo period where you end up realizing the kid in the candy store where all the sessions are fed to you, you got to go dig for them. You got to go create them. You got to engage in those hallway conversations for those topics and things like that. So for me, just watching all of that still be there, right? But I think I don't know if it was the just so everybody's so glad to be back, but it was just so positive and so like inviting and just no drama. And for me, I was just in heaven.
Right.
I'm still all these months later, and I'm still like, oh, it's making me smile immediately.
So there's always seeming a trend every couple of years, first, everything was scrum, and then, so, people started going to lean and Kanban, and then scaling came out, and then, psychological safety was there's always kind of this, that you see this topic trend of things around a certain thing. What did you see this year? Did you see any kind of trend like that, or were we a little bit more spread out?
Well, so I wasn't able to attend the full week, so I didn't get to attend a ton of the sessions and things. I do think business agility is going to continue to, that was picking up momentum pre-COVID, and I think it stalled. In some ways it picked up more momentum and then stalled in other ways, right? So I think that's going to be, I remember Agile Companies was the first time we put that on the program in 2016, right? And we extended it in 17 and beyond. So I think the business agility aspect for me, we're moving beyond just the software, but to the ecosystem,
Right.
and the entire organization surrounding software development is going to continue to be where a lot of the innovations coming out. Like, what can we do in HR? What can we do in marketing? But doing it as a partnership, not a get out of our way or you're making life difficult for us and things along those lines. So for me, that's where I'm most excited about. And watching things that are coming out related to that, and just leadership in general. But I think it was a little bit across the board for me for this year. I think it was, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Right. And it's great. It's great to have that diversity. And it is interesting to see how much, we've gone beyond the basics. There's still a lot of stuff, and it's still good, because if it's your first time conference, you do want to hear about user stories. Tell me about user stories.
60% of the attendees are newbie.
Yeah. And so, because it's like, I run the user group here, Agile Nashville, and there's always, and the group gets to decide what topics we talk about. And so, we always hit the hits. There's always going to be something about user stories. There's always going to be something about planning and releasing and forecasting. There's always going to be QA. So, there's always the hits.
Got a request to do a whole session about retrospectives. I'm like, how do we not know this? Yep. Right? Yeah, but it's there.
But it is a thing where we also have to think that we have been living in it for a long time. And I was just working on a slide about like the adoption. Like, where are we? Where do we think we are with Scrum or Agile or whatever you want to call what certain thing it is? Are we past the early adopter? Are we in the late adopter phase? We're definitely not in laggards yet. I feel like we've crossed the chasm. Nobody says we're not Agile. Then there's just, we're Agile, but really,
what are we? What does that mean?
but there is a point where, so I'm from Music City, and so a lot of the music people call something called losing the dudes, when your little indie band becomes big, and you show up and all the people who only know the one song are there and stuff like that. And you go, oh, I knew this band before, blah, blah, blah. And you lose the dudes. And it's almost felt like Agile is in that phase. You have a lot of people who've been around from the beginning, kind of, yelling at the sky, at the clouds of, that's not what we meant, and because it's now, because it is more popular, it's going to be commoditized. It's going to be, and diluted a little bit to that, so, when you look at it, and someone pointed out that, Agile, the Agile Manifesto is 21 years old. It's old enough to drink. It's, and it might be go home, you're drunk Agile time, but it's also almost as much time between kind of the 70s and waterfall coalescing to when Agile got introduced to now. So that kind of brings up my next topic is, what do you think's next? Like in the next 2 to 3 years, as we go and see the next trend of what's in being spoken about, what's part of kind of the thought leadership zeitgeist, what do you think's going to be there?
Well, I mean, now you're making me selfishly kind of say, well, what I'm working on.
And that's fine. We're going to transition to that. This is a good pivot point.
That's the reality is like, I think maybe this is oversimplification, but I think that these years, what I've realized, maybe I've been trying to help people understand, is we didn't live in this complicated and obvious world. We lived in a complex world. Well, the reality is now I'm starting to go, no, we live in a chaotic world. Like, it's just mad chaos. And are we able to really respond to it? It's not just about discovery of value, but can we resiliently handle discovery of value? Can we make it through no matter what's being thrown at us and still keep our eyes on that goal of discovery of value and what that means? And so for me, where I hope is that business agility, but really the leadership front of what does it really mean to create environments where people thrive? What does it really mean to create environments where people and teams are their most innovative and creative and resilient in whatever is being faced? And I think that is, that whole focus on learning is really partially where I think we have to go. It's not about us versus thems. It's not about winning or losing. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about being willing to think, being willing to examine, experiment, grow. And that was always part of Agile, always part of it. But I think that there's this next level of it for me, and really creating the system and the environment from leaders, whether those senior leaders or leaders within teams, and really supporting that. And that's maybe the battlefield I'm going on.
Right.
And so I'm saying it now because I want more people on the battlefield with me.
Well, and I've been reading this book about that. Lead with blame,
know.
without
I
blame.
know.
That's what it is. Maybe I need to reread. I took it the whole different way. But so the concepts of motivation and resiliency are obviously, some of the, and these big themes in there. Let's take a little step back. So, there's, writing a book is hard. I've thought about it and then tried it, and then that's hard. That's really going through and doing that. So, at what point did you say, all right, this is something I'm ready to go through all of that trouble to put down in a book and put it out there? What was the inspiration to say, this is time for this information to be out there?
So when I said I actively avoided it, but I had conversations. I actually had a conversation with Esther Derby and Mike Cohn about doing it and my fears associated doing it. And they were both so helpful, gave me advice, countered some of the fears that I had and all these things, but I was still like, ugh. And I was privileged and lucky in that I had somebody, a publisher, an editor that was actively recruiting me, wanting me to, and wasn't going to let go. Every 6 months was still pinging me. And I'm like, and then at one point I said, I just don't think I want to do it by myself. And she goes, actually, I have this other person who doesn't want to write a book by herself either. And I was like, she goes, maybe you know each other. And and I was like, well, who is it? And she was Diana Larson. And I literally just started laughing. And I was like, well, let's, Diana and I had known each other for years, but we never worked together. Right. So we got together and we're like, well, do we want to do this? What are you passionate about? What am I passionate? So this was truly an emergent book. This wasn't something like we were already working on and then we crafted it into a book. We truly passionately merged collaboratively this book. But who's going to pass up an opportunity to write with Diana Larson? That was every fear I had. I was like, suck it up, Tricia. I'm not passing up this opportunity. And so we did a couple sessions to just see, is our writing style similar? Are we thinking along the same? It was pretty clear, pretty fast that this was going to work, and for both of us. And so we agreed to do it, but definitely Diana was okay, Tricia, breathe in every fear you got and let's go. And being able to have the opportunity to work with her, collaborate with her, learn from her, wasn't an opportunity I was going to pass up.
So, I heard you talk about this a little bit, and I'd love to explore it some more here about the process of doing that with someone else, with, you're writing a book about leading people and creating this environment that you kind of have to do in this little microcosm of you and this other person. I have done, co-branded content with people before, and it is this little dance of figure, you go through the forming, storming, norming, and performing of, okay, am I treading on your toes? If, what about this? And how do I give you criticism? How do I take criticism? How did that go about at the beginning and get to the point where you kind of got that groove to get the content out?
I say this honestly, and it was obnoxiously smooth, like honestly, like, and I give Diana credit for that, but just our combination, what I brought to the table in terms of my former executive leadership experience and leadership, in different roles experience, and then what she was bringing to the table in terms of her knowledge of the learning environments and what that really brought in, because she had done work previously in this area as well. Our combination, her knowledge of retrospectives and her bringing that, my knowledge of just different scenarios and leadership elements to it, it was just a synergy there. And so we really we co-wrote this. So like there was no like, you do this chapter, I'll do this chapter. Nope. Like we would draft up something and then we would write on Zoom, because it was during COVID. So for hours in a day, we would just write in Zoom and then go back through it. But we did a lot of drafts. So like, I remember the very first draft that we were going to send to like four like super trusted people to send it to. And I got a little sick afterwards, because I was like, oh my God, it's so bad. Why are we sending it to people? But yet that each revision, practicing what we preach in Agile, right? We got back, it helped us find the thread, and it just, as we were dumping basically like, ooh, this concept's really important to me, or this topic's really important to me, it started just to truly do what, as we say in Agile, emerge, right? And it was like, oh, these are the topics that people are afraid to talk about, or they don't really dig in, or they hope that they're just going to go away. No, we need to double down on it. And so that was it. We spent hours multiple times a week on Zoom, co-writing, multiple drafts, multiple reviewers, and got to the end with it. It was a long process, but it did feel like work, but in some ways, honestly, during COVID, I think it also gave me sanity, because there was a connection and something like that,
a touchstone to keep coming back to.
Yeah, like a consistency thing that made the world feel a little less scary, honestly. And then the days that it was super scary, we would just talk, right? And so our friendship grew deeper. It was honestly a very enjoyable experience. I mean, I can't even, there was no rash, mad hang up on Zoom call, not once.
Well, and yeah, I love Diana. I remember, very early in my career, and this is not something I set out to do. I went to school to be a pilot, and I was a bad pilot, and then I got into computers, and I was, the engineer for a long time, and then finally got into Agile and started really doing that. And I remember one of the first conferences I went to, I think was 2009. The big Agile conference anyway. I've been some other ones, but that just seemed to be one where that was the grumpiest old man conference I had been to. Every table I would sit down, they were yelling about this and that and the other and just arguing. And it didn't feel very welcoming at first. And the person who made me feel the most welcome was Diana. She just, she wasn't arguing about anything. And if, like I remember I was a big Team Foundation server guy. And Microsoft, was not seen as an Agile thing at that time. And when I would tell, like I would sit down and we'd be talking to everybody like, yeah. And then I'd say my topic, because I was talking about Scrum and XP and TFS, and they'd go, oh, just like this. and she was like, just, oh, tell me more about that. And just the sweetest, and giving advice without, condescending, this whole thing of leading, I found great. So I love her dearly.
Yes.
So, when you think about that, and I told you this before we got on, that, I just happen to be in the inclusiveness part right now. And that's speaking to me, I am not that soft side person naturally. I am a process guy. There's a place for everything, and everything has a place. And you'll get more flies with honey than you will with vinegar, but if you rip their wings off, they'll eat anything you give them. And it's not a great way to approach things. And so I've had some great people in my life to, help me with that. And psychological safety was a big thing, for me when, people started putting a name around it and things like that. Because I was seeing that, in a leadership role, how just something so benign, something I throw away, say throw away, or do, then don't even think about, has these huge ripple effects across the organization. So when you think about that, when you were talking about inclusiveness and promoting this environment of safety, and you're speaking to leaders that maybe don't understand the impact of things they have, or they play them down, oh, they knew what I meant. How do you, when you're talking to someone like that, obviously you're in the book, but when you're coaching someone on the same material, how does that come about? How do you coach someone who maybe doesn't see that in themselves?
So people will joke sometimes that I'm like the executive leader's sympathizer, because the reality is a lot of times we come at it with this like judgment towards those leaders, right? But we were taught a specific thing. We were taught there's a line and those are taboo topics, and like this is what you got to do. And let's get really honest, sometimes being a leader really stinks. Like you're firing people potentially, you got judgment coming at you everywhere, HR is telling you you're not allowed to say certain things. Like it's not an easy job, it's hard. And I don't say that in the victim mode, but like also on the same note, let's not also treat people like they're incompetent and you're just judging them. Like they've been successful in some form or fashion. That success, that current behavior got them to where they're at. You're now asking them to make adjustments that doesn't align with their experience. That's scary. And so a lot of times when I hear words like, well, how do we manage up, right? It's like, you've already lost. By talking about managing up, you've already lost. How do you partner up? How do you engage up, right? And so when I'm approaching leaders, we wrote this in the book. There are very few leaders that go, who am I going to blame today? Like they're not actively trying to blame. They're not actively trying to shame. They're not actively trying to create unsafe environments. But they're not learning what's necessary to truly create that environment where people can thrive. And at the end of the day, knowledge workers, we use our brain, right? Well, when are you the most creative? When you feel relaxed, when you don't feel judged, when you don't feel shame, when you feel like you're being heard and seen. And we go down this path of like, well, be professional, just do your job. And then get mad that the quality's not there, get mad that the innovation's not there. It's like, no, part of your job as a leader is to create the space that unlocks unlocks that creativity, that unlocks that team co-intelligence. But we have to teach leaders how to do that. We have to, and it's not enough to just say, be inclusive or be collaborative, right? Like that's not enough. How do we help leaders build skills that help create those environments? How do we help leaders see the value of doing it? Not just tell them, but let them experience the value of why this matters. It always cracks me up because people will say, oh, that's too fluffy. I am the least fluffiest person. Like no, but I am emotional. I am vulnerable. I am caring. I'm a human being. And that whole concept of like, it's business, it's not personal. You're quoting a fictional movie about the mob as your business best practice. Stop it. People are humans, and we have to start recognizing that it's personal. And the brain science says that we actually process psychological threats the same as physical threats. So when people make that dumb statement that says like sticks or stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me, brain science actually says not true. It's why you get so upset when someone makes a crappy comment on social media and you can't let it go, right? And those same things happen in the workplace. You don't get to tell your brain to turn those off. And so I ultimately come at leaders going, here's your good goals. You want companies to succeed. You want customers to be satisfied. You want teams to succeed. How's it working out for you? Are you getting as much as you can? Because let's not rewrite history. Now, are you willing to experiment? Are you willing to try some different things that might tap into things that we don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. And that's the approach that I tend to is meet them where they're at and align it back to their ultimate goals, which is what they had in the first place. Not to just blame and shame. That wasn't their goal. They thought, they've heard the statement, got to have that single throat to choke, right? We got to hold people accountable instead of understanding what was really, really most valuable and important.
Well, and you say something that strikes a chord in me, and it's why, the book is very timely for me. I kind of rose through the ranks, and now, I've been lucky in the last 10 years to be in leadership roles. And the company I'm at now, I was, a member of a 4-person executive team. There's the CEO, the CTO, the sales, and me. And every time I've kind of reached a layer, it's like the first time I had, a manager position, I had profit and loss responsibility for millions of dollars. And I heard all the technical guys coming to me and giving me these ridiculous ideas that I'm like, you don't understand. We go home if we don't get this right. There's punitive damages in our contract. And I wanted to go back to every manager I had and go, I'm sorry. I was so just and becoming an executive. And the first time somebody showed me a report of our burn down, and this is when we run out of money. And I go, that's not very far. And they're like, oh, well, we'll figure it out. We always do. And I'm like, and to your point, I've had this idea of a presentation I want to do, but it sounds so, it's number one, narrowly focused. And I don't know, a little, like you said, a little pretentious of, psychological safety for leaders, because, like you said, everybody's saying you have to make psychological safety. I'm like, where's mine? And it is hard to kind of say, oh, woe is me, I'm in leadership and, things, but, I'm not Jeff Bezos. I'm making tons of money, and, like you said, going through a round of layoffs, the build up to that, of trying to avoid everything, trying to see what you can do, seeing, what did I do that made this happen, and laying people off. And there's always the thing of, but that person lost their job and you got to keep your job. Well, yes, there is that, but it is hard. It does suck, and, we went through that, and somebody had pursued and hired away from someplace, I had to lay off a month later, and it crushed me. And then a couple of years later, we hired her sister, and I was like, oh, I love your sister. Da, da, da. We're actually getting some positions. I'd love to bring her. She's like, Tom, she'll never work for you again. And I'm like, oh, I'm the bad guy. I'm the Mr. Smithers. Cause she thinks, in her mind, I was like, excellent. I get to fire, there sometimes has to be that blame.
That's true or not. That's the experience. That's the impact. That's the reality.
Right. So it is, I think it's, that lead without blame is both ways, that it can't just be on that one-sided. I think that's a great way to take this and apply it in both directions. So when you think about your experience, and like we said, nobody comes in and goes, yes, today I'm going to make the minions cry.
There might be one person. I know
probably,
everybody right now, they're like, you haven't met. And I'm like, I get it. There might be one person, but they're not many, right? Yes.
Everybody's the hero in their own story.
Correct.
What are some of the most common ones you see of little things that leaders do that have that death by 1,000 cuts, that you didn't realize it, but this thing you do is making this environment? Are there some easy kind of, like I see this one all the time?
Yeah, so let me think about this. What's coming to my mind more might be soapboxes than truly the best answer to this question. But I think in some ways our performance reviews are something that we really need to rehaul. Performance reviews for many companies are about budgetary allocation. Just make budget. You spend more money half the time doing the performance reviews than if you just divide the money. Performance reviews that are focused on individual feedback and accomplishments. Like the more I get it, the more like making sure that the goals are smart. Well, I'm sorry. I don't care if you read a book. I don't care. You're past kindergarten. Great. Success. What did you do with the contents of that book, right? What did you gain from that book? What have you experimenting as a result of reading that book. That's what I care about. That's what I want to engage. That's what I want to discuss. That's what I want to be doing year round. But we make these performance reviews like, you will attend 2 classes and read 1 book. And it's like, check mark, success, right? Like, and then we do these things that are just not helping people create the right type of learning environment. So performance reviews are one of those ones that just we could rehaul dramatically and have a big impact. The other, a lot of times one of the other ones that I would say is that, but I have to feeling as a leader. But I have to step in and I have to say this. I have to assign people. I have to, and the minute the words I have to are coming out of your mouth, chances are a fear is driving this way more than really the end result. And I remember thinking how many times, like, I have to pick the people that are going to be on the Tiger team. I have to pick the best of the best because I can't let this project fail. There's penalties, there's all these things, right? But I would say the words, I have to. And then somebody once approached me and went, did it ever occur to you they're the best because you're picking them? And I'm like, no, that's true. That's very, very true. And so a lot of times, like, challenge those reactions as a leader of the I have to do this review. I have to trust but verify. I have to pick people versus getting volunteers. I have to, right, review this, or because every one of those I have to's, you're not sharing ownership and you're actually getting less results, short-term results, not necessarily long-term results. And so that's, the very first thing is just take an inventory of, like, how many I have to's are you doing in a day as a leader? And you might be surprised with that, and start challenging some of them. Some of them you might feel you can, or some of them you might go, no, I really have to, Tricia. But at least then you're starting to question it and challenge it versus just going down that state of obligation that might not be getting you the results you want anyways.
Sure. And there may be a lot of people who aren't in leadership positions who kind of don't get that, but then you might, take it to a lower level. I know when I was doing a lot of coaching early on, especially for Scrum Masters, one of the things I would do to see, how are you, because you are a leader, you're a peer leader, is we're about to go walk in the standing stand up, and I'll hold the Scrum Master back and say, stay here. Don't walk in. Let's see what happens. And if you feel like you have to be in there for it to happen and everybody stands around and doesn't know how to do it, okay, then we haven't done this the way that it's intended. You may be answering the 3 questions and doing the walk of the board or whatever it is, but we have not created the environment we want. And so, at every level, you can kind of think those things.
Yes,
but it is a thing that, I've been through a couple of companies where, there's a big shakeup and new people are coming in and old people are leaving and there's confusion and and there's a lot of fear. And so, there is this reaction of, I have to do that because I have to get the light shined on me. I have to prove my value. And I had someone that I was talking to at one of these points in times who was very crucial to the company, but was struggling. And I said, well, they need you. And she said to me, I don't want them to need me. I want them to want me, because if they need me, the second they have somebody else who can do what I can do, they won't have me anymore. And I could watch and look back at her behavior in the past and say, I see where you're reacting out of that. That's why you don't want to participate in that. That's why there's a hoarding of knowledge. That's why this is this. And me kind of thinking about, need versus want, and the combination of the two. So when you think about that, when you think about somebody who's acting, you said it, acting out of fear because I'm afraid if I don't put some of that light on me and make sure, look how I'm up on the cross and it's, I'm carrying this burden. How do you coach them to feel safe in that, themselves?
I don't know if I'd call it coaching them, but like one of the things while you were talking made me think of a third thing that is easy to do that anybody could do right now is lift people up. Be that cheerleader, be that supporter, appreciate. There's too many times that we do things like, oh yeah, thanks, and then walk away. It's like, no, give a genuine appreciation, give a little token of appreciation, take the moment to tell somebody how awesome they are. Like, I am where I'm at because other people believed in me before I believed in myself. So that's simple. I'm lucky. I had amazing people that would not let me, like, even in my mention of like Esther and Mike earlier giving me advice about writing a book, they were like, why are you not doing this? Like, but I didn't believe in me to do it. Right. And so in a lot of cases, one of the best things we can be doing in this is propping people up and acknowledging the value that they are bringing, that, and it doesn't always have to be like you delivered this on time. It can be like you really helped make sure all voices were heard in this meeting. You really made me feel like I belonged in this meeting, right? Like, give that feedback, give that appreciation for people, and take those moments, especially the more remote that we are, the more disconnected we feel, the more we need it. Like, it's just so small and so easy, and yet we're just so bad at it. And it's something that anybody can be doing to avoid some of that. Am I even valued, or am I needed? Am I wanted? Right? When people feel a sense of belonging and appreciation, it unlocks more of what they can do.
Right.
Yeah.
And to double down on that, something, I was married for 20 years and we went through a lot of love language, the books and therapy with that. And then I don't know if I've got it back here, but there's a book they wrote about business love languages and how that is. And I found that very important because, there's been situations where I've observed somebody, leading someone and just, and trying to give them accolades, but giving them ones they don't care about. Like that's just that, that doesn't ring true to them. I've had to coach, I went like I said, I was working in sales a lot at one point in time, and I'm not that kind of, let's that, hunter, got to win at all costs kind of guy. And so when I would be motivated that way by, that's kind of the typical sales thing is lots of sports analogies. Look at how much money we're going to make. And I'm like, that doesn't ring true to me, so you can give me all those accolades in that way. So it's finding the voice for each person, and it takes time. You have to be curious about it. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to reward everybody the same way and talk to everybody the same way. I have to go, what does Tricia drive? What drives her? And what things do I see her reacts to? Yeah. The motivation is part of that inclusivity.
Yep.
So what, when you think about all there is in the book, if somebody comes up and says, what's the book about? And you only have like, 30 seconds to tell them, what's your elevator pitch on the book?
Oh, I should be good at this now, but I like giving different elevator pitches for different reasons, right? Like, I don't like having just a single elevator pitch, but here's my thing for the book. And this goes back to that. I'm a senior leader empathizer a little bit, is I want to help leaders learn how to empower instead of just telling them empower people, because it's not fair. So many leaders just do you're empowered, and then crap hits the fan, not understanding that that's not telling people you're empowered is not actually empowerment. And so for me, this book is a guide, a framework, a focus for leaders to go, how am I adding value when I'm empowering?
So that brings up another good point that I'd love to talk a little bit about, and then we'll wrap up with the story I want to share with you. So I had a great conversation with Bob Galen when we were at Agile 2022, and I love Bob, and Jennifer Fields, who works a lot with Bob, works with us now. So Bob is even more in our stratosphere a lot more. And he and I were lamenting about, as we said, when I became an executive, and had that responsibility and was over all these different things, my entire approach to leadership and Agile and all that stuff completely pivoted. And it's hard because we have a lot of people who say, I'm an executive coach, and you've never been an executive. You've never been in a leadership position. And we have a lot of people who say, well, I've been a CEO. Like, yeah, but you were a CEO of a consulting company, of a Agile consulting company.
One person consulting company.
And so, it is different when you have to carry that bag, when you have that that P&L, when you have people's lives, a large amount of people's lives and clients in your hand. And so it is, I think, a place that's lacking because there's just, even though it's been around for a long time, we don't have that wave of agile leaders. I think there's some, but we have a lot of coaches who talk about it. And so how do you coach someone when it's something you haven't done? And I brought this up to Bob, and we did a little exercise where he coached me on guitar. I'm a guitar player and Bob is not. And he says, let me coach you on guitar playing. And it was a fun exercise. But when you think about that, when you think about someone who is wanting to take this from the content and they're not a leader and saying, all right, I want to go to my leaders. We said, don't manage up, partner up. How do I do that if I haven't been in those shoes?
So you're throwing a lot of words that have dynamics to me. So coaching, though, is never about having the content. Truly pure professional coaching is about just helping and creating a space for the person to unlock. So if I'm truly professional coaching, I don't always go, I have to know, I've just got to create a space where you get to think about what you're doing next. So let's take professional coaching kind of like, and that's why I call myself a leadership advisor, okay, because I use professional coaching, but I also use mentoring. I also use advisement. I also use, right. So that's why I actually don't call myself an executive coach. I call myself a leadership advisor. So I have to explain that. Otherwise, sure. I can hear my colleagues like Jake Caliber is getting mad at me if I try and imply something that's wrong about it. Right. But a lot of cases, like, when I say partner up, a lot of the things that we talk about in our book, again, it's not just for senior leaders, it's that anybody can be a leader, right? And so what can you control? What can you practice and do? Maybe you can't change the entire performance review system, but can you change how you're delivering performance reviews within your direct reports? Can you experiment within that part of it to use that information to then take and have that conversation with your boss that you haven't been in, that you don't know that role, and go, look, I ran this experiment where I basically said, you give your own score, and unless it's egregious, I'm going to give you the exact same score. And here's the results of that experiment. They actually rated themselves harder than I was going to. And here's the, and then have using that information to then go, what would that be like if we did it? What if we did that experiment? And so you're not coming and going, hey, here's a book you should read, which I will be honest, I have done to a leader before. Okay. But now you're kind of going, well, here's what I've been able to experiment with. And I would love if we can keep experimenting with this at even a bigger scale. But by demonstrating you're experimenting, doing that, and finding, even if it's a small slice that you control, that you can do, you're approaching from a place where I'm learning and I want us to now be learning. And that's always going to have a bigger impact on people versus I need your knowledge to take this to the next level. And I'm not just saying that to like prop somebody up. There's knowledge you have that I do not have that I need to keep this experiment running, and looking at it from that perspective. For me, that's just part of change management. It's building that common shared why we're doing this. It's building common goals associated to it, and then experimenting as we go forward, but together. And I find that's a way more productive approach than anything else.
So to wrap up the book section, what's your next book?
Well, actually,
I know you just got done with this one, but I know there's probably some leftovers that were kind of got on the cutting room floor that you're like, oh, I wish I could have gotten in there. Maybe I need to write that next book.
So honestly, I'm going to answer it super honest of what is happening for me is I actually think my next book is going to be more of a memoir type book about the loss of my firstborn son.
Okay.
It has actually unlocked my that is something that I've sat on for 18 years, and I have a core part of it, but I've always been like, no. And doing this experience, when I say business and personal is all intermingled for me now, it really is. And for me, that story is the one that I think I need to share next. And so I'm now accepting and acknowledging that you're the first person to ask me that, and you're the first person to get the public, honest answer about it. But that's honestly where I think I'm probably going to go next. I will say, if I do write another business specific related, I will do a co-writing again. That it will be a co-write.
Well, I look forward to both of those. I do think, the last 5 years, there was some loss and trauma in my life, and realizing that, hey, I had it pretty darn good up till now, and it's the whole thing of, until you're in that hot water, you don't know what you really are and how much you learn about yourself through loss, and moving forward. And I think
I think it goes to your inclusivity part, right? Of where you are at is like, it completely changed who I wanted to be as a leader. Sure. And what I wanted work to mean. And so for me, it is part of my story, but it's the initiator of agile space for me, and why I won't give up on this battle.
Sure. I mean, a family unit is a system, just like anything else, and a lot of those patterns still apply. Well, that, I think it's great that you found that, to give voice to that, because sometimes that is the cathartic part, is that sharing of it. So I look forward to that. So
now, don't ask me how long. I will know. I mean, it may take me 5 years to do it. Okay, but
I know, I get you. I've started and stopped a couple of times. I had someone who said, let's do it together. And I was like, I don't know if that, because you do have to choose the right partner. You got very lucky. And Diana got very lucky in finding you both finding each other.
We were a great combination, man.
So this story starts, I was coaching a team in 2012. And this company, and it was, the typical thing where, I got brought in by middle management, and, upper management was saying, sure. And then doing all the things that, they typically do, but we were trying to make the most of what we could inside. There was a lot of factors against us and a lot of departments inside that just weren't getting it. And we were, but it was the work, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And 2013 comes along, and we've been doing this for now some time. And that's when the Agile conference was first in Nashville. And the leader of that company had 3 tickets, and they're like, I want to reward the people who have really loved Agile and send them to us. I said, don't send them. Send the 3 who hate it the most. That's where we need to send them, or just not getting it, or resisting, or whatever. And so we selected those people and sent them. And I was in the conference. I'm walking, it's halfway through, and I'm walking down the hall, and one of them comes up to me, and he's literally cried, and he takes me by the shoulders and say, I get it. Because he'd been one of the people who didn't really get it, was resisting. He had been, and he was so overwhelmed, and he was the fallen man reformed, and nobody preaches harder. And that man's name was Dipendra, and he had just come from your talk. So I was there when that happened. I was the one who had been kind of witnessing him struggle in this, and he talks, and he and I talk about it all the time. He comes to the Azure user group, and he brings it up a lot. It obviously had this very big impact, and I know you guys have talked about it.
This is a gift that he had brought back from India for me with my pencil holder.
But it's I think it's the sweetest story. I tell it very often about, especially when you're trying to get to someone and you can't, like, how am I going to get to this person? How do I get person? Everybody has their own way that speaks to them. And that just, hit your talk, touched him. And like, it was like, I saw night and day when we went back, he was on board, and he was promoting, and he became kind of an advocate even in himself. And it is, I know he's told you this, that you guys have shared this, but I want to tell you, as an outside observer who watched that pattern with him, you had this huge impact on him that, again, still resonates today, a decade later.
It's you don't always know. Like, I started speaking to pay it forward and to do things, but you don't always know who you impact. And I'm lucky in this scenario because he does make an effort to highlight, but he's also come back and highlighted that appreciation. So talk about 360 with it, right? He's highlighted that appreciation to me at moments when I needed to hear it the most. Honestly, when there were moments when I was like, I might be done with this community. I'm done. I'm out. And just, why are we even doing this? And am I even helping anybody? And having those moments where you question, are you helping at all? And he's come back into my life at different times to give that appreciation still all these years later. So to then also hear right now, like I'm having all sorts of emotions, you're going to make me cry on this. Dang it. You've got me twice in the last 10 minutes with this, is to then also know the ripple of that impact and that dynamic. Thank you.
Well, and it's, thank you for, that connection it made. And I want to tell you that I know you've heard it from him, but I watched him come back, and he was over the QA team, and him being so much more receptive. Him, we talked about some things we did when we would be grooming and stuff. He loves this idea of design and test, going up to the whiteboard and giving markers to an engineer and a tester, and seeing him take those learnings and now empower his people, and they kind of then became empowered and became the next phase of people who I heard a lot of those people went to other companies. And in fact, one of the other guys we sent to the same conference who thought, I was teaching snake oil. He went to another company that I had coached as well, and they had just been a little bit further along in their journey. And he came back to me, and I got a little bit of the same thing but it was one of those backhanded compliments. Tommy, when you first came in, I thought you were crazy, and this was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But then we went over here, and there was a guy that I knew who just intrinsically kind of knew this, and he was the leader there. And he's like, now I get it. And so, you're right. It is always good to hear that feedback. And it was, like I said, the man was crying. You touched him, very, very deeply, and changed his life. And I just want, I know that, but to hear that from an outside observer, I wanted you to know that.
Well, that's part of the meeting people where they're at, right? Nobody goes walking around trying to be a bad leader. People are not doing it. They think they're doing the helpful thing. The justifications sound legit in their mind. And it's a scary, scary thing to be a leader that truly empowers, because you got to give up some control. And I liked me some control, people. I did. So if I can do it and I can share that, then it does help other people understand their journey more in it. Sure. And so I'm eternally grateful for that moment, for many moments, but to also then be able to hear the additional dynamics and things like that. It's cool.
Well, that's why you do it. And just think of how many more you're going to have these with all these people reading this great book. So, Tricia, thank you so much for joining me today. I very much appreciate it. Is there anything else going on? Any upcoming things that you want to share? Stuff going on?
All my next publics are all in January. So I'm kind of done with my publics for this year. Right. But if you have budget for this year and you don't know what to do with it, it's next year, January. But you can sign up on Eventbrite. But I'm not doing a ton. I do like one leadership class, one facilitation, and one like impactful training and speaking. So all leadership skills that help with leading without blame. But all of those are in January. So everything else for the rest of this year is all kind of private at this point, unfortunately.
Gotcha. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your year, and thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Absolutely.